Thank you for coming today. Senator Steve Daines, I'm going to kick this off. First of all, it's not often that we have two cabinet secretaries here in Montana at the same place at the same time. And I'm thankful to Secretary Perdue and Secretary Zinke for making the trip here to Montana and to spend time with us here today to hear firsthand what's going on in our state. This is Secretary Perdue's second visit to Montana in the last 90 days. So Secretary Perdue is he's starting to really understand Montana, and he brings our same values and so forth that we have here in Montana. But let me say this. First, I want to thank the firefighters. I want to thank the incident commanders. I want to thank our law enforcement. I want to thank the National Guard, who are all working together to protect our communities, protect our structures, protect lives here with this Lolo Peak fire. Unfortunately, the weather forecast is not encouraging. We got an update here this morning. It looks like we're going to be into an extended fire season well into September. And again, grateful for the fact that we have such expertise and great cooperation between the federal government, our counties, and our state here to fight this fire. But I can tell you this, as I travel around Montana, as we're here today, Montanans are saying we are tired of breathing the smoke. We are tired of seeing these catastrophic wildfires. And either we are going to better manage our forests, or the forests are going to manage us. And we're seeing that across our state today. Montana is at ground zero of the fire season of 2017. In fact, when I left Washington, D.C. in early August, the top 10 fires in the nation were right here in Montana. We're spending too much time and money fighting fires. We need to instead spend more time and money managing our forests. So, again, thankful for our two secretaries as well as Congressman Gianforte being here today. And I want to turn this over to Secretary Perdue, who was out here for our Ag Summit in Great Falls in early June. And let's remember, we have two departments here today between Interior and Ag that are probably two of the most important departments that affect Montana. And as you all know, the Forest Service reports through the Secretary of Agriculture. And Sonny, thank you for coming out to Montana.
Thank you, Senator Daines. And we're Secretary Zinke and I are happy to be here. Obviously, I'm standing among three Montanans trying to understand really the national forest and how it contributes to the economy and what the damage it does when we have these kind of wildland fires that we're seeing here and the serious situation we have in Montana. Secretary Zinke of Interior and at USDA, we've got joint responsibilities for these public lands. And what we want to learn is really how we can get ahead of these forest fires. We can't do anything about the weather, but we can do things about forest management that make sense so we can diminish forest fires for the future. And that's what I'm very proud of the people we have here, both from the U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Park Service, and all the federal assets along with the state assets, the Department of Natural Resources, and particularly the local assets. But the collaboration is unparalleled as far as these people working together. The people on the ground, doesn't matter who they are, they work to protect human life and human property and in collaboration with one another. So there's no possessiveness there. What Secretary Zinke and I, along with Congress, has to figure out how we can bring to bear the resources to manage these forests in a way that diminish the possibility of these wildland fires in the future. That's why we're here, trying to determine how we can get ahead of this. I'm not from Montana, but I wouldn't want these kind of situations having to live with on a year in, year out basis. And we don't want the people of Montana to either. So that's what we're here. Thank you, Senator Daines, Congressman Gianforte, and I want to turn it over to the homegrown Montana boy, Secretary Zinke here. Thank you.
First of all, thanks Greg and Steve for the invitation. It's great to be back in Montana. And for the forest fire professionals, our prayers go out to the families of our lost warriors. There's no question that when we get to fight a fire, the professionalism of our law enforcement, the departments working together, the state, it all works well. The issue before us is how do we put the firefighters out of business by looking at preparation first and make sure that we have healthy forests, and make sure we go back and make sure we reduce the fuel load so we don't have these catastrophic events year after year after year. As pointed out, in 17 years of fires burn in this valley, is the summers here are about a month and a half, because the rest of the time is spent fighting forest fires. And that's a significant concern for the elderly too. And we have a lot of residents here that all of a sudden have health conditions because they have to endure weeks after weeks after weeks, summers after summers, rather than enjoying Montana, which is Montana's a great place to live. So rather than out there being out fishing and camping and doing what we're supposed to be doing, we're out evacuating our homes and having to go through this year and year. So I can tell you, as far as the cabinet goes and the Trump administration, we get along extraordinarily well. This is not the first trip that the Secretary and I have been on. We were together in Boise. We're together here, and we're going to make sure that the Department of Interior and the Department of Agriculture team, because we're all team members, work together. We're going to find ways to be more joint. We're going to find ways to manage our forests. And Senator Daines was right. Between Interior, the recreation, and the parks, and what we have in Montana, and Ag, between all the good things that Ag does, not only Forest Service, but our agriculture business, you have two people that care tremendously about this state. And I can tell you that Montana's a map in Washington, because when you have two secretaries spend a lot of time here, the president's been here, we get it. And I can tell you lastly is I am honored to be Interior. I want the Forest Service under Interior. I don't think I'm going to get it. But it's because of the professionals of the Forest Service. You're out there every day. Thank you for all that you do. And I'm going to introduce the man who took my seat. Now, I was sorry to see my Congress seat go. I like, I think, my position better at the moment. But I can tell you, there's no one that works harder for Montana. It's tough being the only congressman. There's a lot of you handle every issue. And I can tell you, sometimes Steve's budget is twice what the congressman's budget is. But we have the same ground. And so the number of offices, I think Greg has been every county, I think, since you've been elected. And last week's schedule was 17 or 16 towns all around, so he spends a lot of time behind the windshield and getting around Montana. But with that, our congressman from the great state of Montana, the lone congressman, Greg Gianforte.
Thank you, Brian. And Brian, you've given me big shoes to fill, so I'll do my best. I just want to say, Secretary Zinke and Secretary Drew, thank you for being here. This is significant. I think it's important that you're here seeing the devastation we're seeing in the Bitterroot Valley firsthand. It's hard to imagine unless you've been here. This is the 5th fire I've been on this summer. I was up in Zortman. I was over at the Lodgepole Complex, down at the Bruner Fire, and over in Lincoln, and now here on this fire. This has become all too common. The one theme that I've seen on every fire I've been on this summer is the incredible professionalism we've seen from the Forest Service, from the BLM, from the local law enforcement, the communities coming together to fight these fires. It's everywhere I hear the same tale of collaboration and good outcomes. But it's become too frequent. These fires are happening too often. It's become part of our life. And I want to say this is not about money. It's about management of our forests. And we need to get ahead of this because it's become too prevalent. We need to manage our forests. And the benefits are clear. If we manage our forests, we'll have healthier forests. There'll be more wildlife, more hunting opportunities. We'll have timber going to our mills, creating jobs, and we'll have less intense and less frequent forest fires. Everyone benefits. Conservation benefits, and our communities benefit. We all benefit. And yet, were tied up in knots through extensive and ridiculous permitting processes and frivolous lawsuits from environmental extremists. I was just over in Lincoln recently. There was a project there that the Forest Service worked together with the community and the county commissioners called the Stonewall Project. And it took 8 years to get that forest management project approved, only to have a single judge overturn it. And now that forest is burning. That's not the way it should be. We need to do better. Again, I want to, my heart goes out to the community here. There is devastation in this valley because we have not managed our forests well, and we need to do better.
We have time for just a couple of questions.
Stonewall, no pun intended, right?
Secretary Perdue, can I ask you and the other gentleman here if you think that climate change has anything to do with the length and intensity of the fire season we're seeing lately, and whether there's anything that folks in government can do about that or should do about that?
Well, I had a good review of our Forest Service people here going all the way back to 1890. We've had major forest fires, large fires in the eastern part of the nation at periods of time. There obviously is climate change, temperature change, weather change, and we have to deal with it. We have to adapt to it. And we have to manage the forest, as these two gentlemen have talked about, getting ahead of that. What you see on some of the privately managed land where I'm from, and even out here with the Plum Creek property, you see less forest fires. So let's do what we can, irregardless, irrespective of the cause or the effect. Let's do what we can. That's why we're here. Now, we can't affect what the weather is or anything else, but we can affect how we manage these forests to reduce the impact of forest fires.
So just back on history, though, go back to 1910. What happened in 1910?
Yeah.
We had the big burn. 3 million acres in Montana and Idaho, 87 lives lost. In the 1930s, we had the Great Dust Bowl. My ancestors living up in the high line of Montana had to leave our state to go to Canada to survive. And so the climate has always been changing. We go through warmer cycles, cooler cycles, droughts, excessive precipitation. We are in a warm cycle right now. We are in drought conditions here in Montana, and consequently, we're having a severe fire season.
Secretary Perdue, Senator Chester has proposed a bill a year ago, it's still active now, to shift some funding over to be able to make emergency funding available. How much of a help would that be? And I guess a follow-up for either one of you about supporting that concept.
I don't necessarily want emergency funding. I want ongoing funding there. There is a fire funding deficiency. What's happened is the U.S. Forest Service used to spend about 15% of its budget on fighting and fire suppression. Now it's spending 55% of its budget. That means that we cannot manage we don't have the monetary resources to manage these forests to reduce the fuel. So I know Senator Crapo on the Senate side has a bill there to solve and resolve the fire funding issue. That's a critical issue for Congress, and I hope all of our members of Congress, I know these gentlemen here are fighting for that every day. Senator Daines and I talked about it on the way over here of getting that resolved. So hopefully we can get that done. There is a bill. Representative Westerman in the House has a bill as well to get that done. I believe there's a lot of momentum. I'm meeting with the Office of Management and Budget and the FEMA people, Department of Homeland Security, to talk about whether we do it in the Budget Control Act or the Stafford Act. We've got to have help to get ahead of these issues.
Well, a lot of it is this, too, is that you got to go on the offense and actually look at the problem. The problem is not necessarily funding to fight forest fires. It is getting ahead so we don't have these catastrophic fires. So Interior, we fully loaded, and our budget, we increased from last year to get rid of the dead and dying timber and get ahead of the problem. And this is why the Secretary of Ag is here, is we're looking at what can we do so this valley doesn't light up every year, year after year. And a lot of it is putting more flexibility, more ability for the frontline management of the professionals here to give them the tools to get ahead of the problem. There's foresters here that have more experience than anyone fighting forest fires. I got Dave Mahalik over here working for me. No one knows more about our parks than Dave. But we need to give them the resources in the front line, the flexibility, and get rid of the lawsuits so they can do their job. And that's where I think we can focus on near-term gains about, again, giving the tools to the front line so our professionals can do the job.
So look, we've got 5 million acres in Montana identified as diseased timber that should be treated. So far, we've treated 46,000 acres.
Steve and Greg, what about the Equal Access to Justice Act? It seems that's being used a lot to, once a project gets posted, whether they've got boots on the ground, all of a sudden, boom, a judge comes in and says, out it goes. So is there a way to revise that?
Yeah, Peter, you're absolutely right. The Equal Access to Justice Act was enacted for a good reason, but it's been hijacked by environmental extremists who are using it to create a business model to essentially shut down almost every forest management project here in the state. Talking with people in the timber industry, over 50% of planned forest management projects in the state here are challenged in court, tied up, and ultimately they burn. And we need to put some common sense safeguards, guardrails on equal access to justice to reduce the number of frivolous lawsuits. Yes.
We have time for one more.
Yeah. By the way, up in Lincoln County, where is the home of the Libby loggers, used to had a vibrant timber industry. In fact, it's where Mark Roscoe went to high school. Today, there's not a single active mill up in Lincoln County. And the Libby loggers could be called the Libby lawyers now, because it is the lawyers who are funding to these extreme environmental groups who are having a tremendous impact, devastating impact here, and allowing us to move forward here on some common sense timber projects.
And the mill of Darby.
Rob, gentlemen, you guys have been working on solving the fire borrowing problem for about the last 5 years. That's taken up 55% of your budget that otherwise would have been going to forest management to get ahead of your problem. So either it's in your departmental side of things, trying to sort out how to keep yourselves out of lawsuits and keep your people working on forest management, or it's your gentleman's job to get the legislation through, and I don't know who's on first. When's that going to get done?
So there's a marriage to get bipartisan, bicameral support and get this on the president's desk. We need to bring together a change in terms of fundamentally how we fund our fires, to give the secretary the latitude he needs here, to ensure he's investing in forest management and not just fighting fires. And second, combined with forest management reform. If we don't address the litigation issue, the frivolous litigation issues from these extreme environmental groups, we're never going to get ahead of this curve.
That's what's taking up 55% of the budget.
What's that?
55% of his Forest Service budget is going up in smoke right here. That's not litigation, that's fire management.
No, that's a cause of litigation that has stopped fire management ahead. Litigation that stopped. You talked about the Stonewall. That's a good example right there of what's happened. And that's what's evolved into the 55% because you couldn't do some of these things that you wanted to. It is a cause and effect situation.
Well, and I'll tell you this, is you ask the professionals back there, and interior should be the best job as well. Park ranger, it should be the best job in the world, right? You're out there, you're in the woods, things are good. We're ranked last as far as job satisfaction in the Park Service, last of the resource management. And you ask why? Because our frontline people are micromanaged, they don't have enough resources. Resources have been stripped and put at the region, and they're spending more time behind a desk than they are out in the field. And we are bogged down in bureaucracy, and we can't let our professionals, or we haven't been able to let our professionals do what they're trained to do. We have great foresters. They know how to make a healthy forest, but you got to give them the tools and the ability to do it and get them out from behind the desk and get them where they're happy, healthy, and promoting the stewardship of our public lands. This is not the first time that our public lands have been at risk, and everyone in America loves their public lands. But we've got to put in place the ability for our professionals to be able to go out and manage it. They love the land. They're great stewards. They have the right skill set. We just have to allow them to do it.